Last time, we finished up talking about how to survive inspections. Well, sometimes it doesn't work out and you lose your buyer. Maybe because of inspections, maybe it was a low appraisal, or maybe the buyer just got cold feet. Whatever the reason, today on this podcast, we are going to tell you how to get your property back on the market so you can find your next buyer. At the Ohio Property Group, we call this rebounding. I know, I'm apparently obsessed with relationship parallels, but I digress. Sellers a lot of times worry about the stigma of going back on the market after a deal dies. But after thousands of deals and many rebounds, I can confidently tell you there is hope. There are quite a few things you can do to not only make yourself, your listing, more attractive to the buyer market, but there are also some actually pretty good benefits to the second time around. Stick around, let's learn all about our patented Rebound Playbook. Hi, and welcome to Talking Realty, the go-to podcast for home sellers looking to make more money, save time, and avoid headaches. Whether you're selling a flip, a new build, an income property, or the place you call home, you're in the right place. I'm your host, Glen Whitten, 20-year realtor and founder of the Ohio Property Group. Most people hate paying huge commissions to realtors. At the Ohio Property Group, we do all the same things as other realtors, but instead of charging a 6% commission to sell a property, we do the same thing for a low, flat fee. So our sellers get better results and they save thousands of dollars in the process. To learn more, head over to talkingrealty.com and pick up our free newsletter or any of our many free home seller tools. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to the Talking Realty podcast so you never miss a thing. Now, let's get to it. Welcome, home sellers. As usual, I've got a story for you. Seller Victoria, once again, because we've had a historically hot market here for the last few years, and we're pretty good at what we do here at the old Ohio Property Group. But anyway, ended up multiple offers, had a cash deal. Actually, we had several cash deals on this one. Ended up at $840,000 and contingent only on inspections. So no appraisal, no home sale, no nothing. Just they wanted to do a quick walkthrough. They were from way out of town and weren't even really that familiar with the area. They were just coming in. The buyers were just coming in to be closer to family. So the house is about 30 years old and there were a few surprises, but nothing we couldn't handle. Pretty easy stuff to get done and wrapped up before closing. However, the buyers ended up walking away. So the house was no longer staged at this point. This was probably the biggest downer besides losing the buyer. But we had pretty good activity, when we put it under contract the first time. But I was, nervous for the sellers, but still pretty confident we were going to find another buyer for them. However, it was beautifully staged, but once it went under contract and we were getting toward the end of the long inspection period, there were no more hurdles left. So the buyers went ahead, the sellers went ahead and removed all the furniture, moved into their new place. And now we've got a vacant property on our hands. So not as ideal as I would like it to be. So the good news is we have a playbook for this. And I will tell you toward the end of the episode how it turned out after we executed some of the moves, some of the secret plays in our little green notebook here. So the worst part about inspections is the anxiety. It really is, because you don't know what's going to happen. And we've talked a ton about this here recently. But one of the outcomes that people fear the most is, what if the deal dies? It's a little easier for me. I'm not as, emotionally involved as the sellers are. But at the same time, I recognize that this could be, a pretty good hiccup in the process. So years and years ago, as per usual, when we spot patterns, we try to develop a playbook, or when we have success, even if it's completely by accident or so seemingly, we go back and we do an after action and we maybe call it a postmortem, but we rip it apart and see if we can figure out maybe something that happened. Maybe it was a particularly effective email. Maybe it was a negotiating tactic. Who knows? But our goal over the many transactions that we do is to find what works and get it down on paper so that we can test it in future transactions and then really pull it together into a playbook. And our playbooks are developed nonstop. So just because it's written down and we use it a lot, we're constantly evolving. And this playbook is no different. Um, but anyhow, so some years ago, we came up with what we called the Rebound Playbook. And it does stink for the seller when the deal dies, but we're here to let them know that there is hope. There's actually some advantages to the second lap around the track, um, especially given some of the factors that can happen in the first deal. And so we're not just, soothing our seller by telling them, hey, there's a lot of hope here. We can say, look, we don't really have to work too hard on the decisions here. So we send them an overview of the process and try to make them feel more confident in getting back out there. I really do seem to be leaning on the relationship parallels. So just like your friend who's been dumped, you're going to pick them back up and, you're going to take them to the salon, get their hair did and get them some new clothes and get them back out there because you can't just curl up and die. And it's no different in real estate. You can't just curl up and say, oh my gosh, my buyer fell through. What are we going to do? So the first step in the Rebound Playbook, we'll just get right into it, is kind of dealing with the initial shock. And this is where we kind of play a little psychology here on our end. But the sellers, even though they worry about it, they're still a little bit surprised when it happens, sometimes very surprised when it happens. And as we work through the playbook, you're going to see that this is a highly emotionally charged process for everybody involved. And there are things you can do immediately in the early portions of the rebound that may actually bring the buyer back to the table. We'll touch on a couple of those. But the first step for us is delivering the bad news. If you're the seller, you're going to get it directly. You're going to get it right from the buyer or the buyer's agent, as we lovingly refer to them as the buyer's camp. You're going to get an email, a phone call, a text message. Hey, they may even send a telegram. I don't know. It depends on how terrified they are of you. But somehow somebody's going to let you know this deal is coming unglued. And it may happen for one reason on paper. So, for example, in Victoria's story, it happened because of inspections. That was the off-ramp they used to get out of the deal. But the reality was it had nothing to do with the inspections. That was just the excuse. So we had to first go back and see if we could deal with why, the real reason why. And the agent essentially said, look, they freaked out. They think they overbought and they're not sure they want to commit to, that much cash to a house. So they're just going to do something a little bit different for a while, slow down the process. And they think they acted impulsively, which, maybe they did. They probably did. It was brand new on the market and they had just started looking, according to her. But anyhow, so it could be because of buyer's remorse, even though it may be presenting itself as a financing problem, inspection problem. But sometimes buyers just back out and we never know why. I told this story a few episodes ago about our fictitious Melissa. She's real, but that's just not her name. And she had a deal that went all the way to the day before closing. And we had a walkthrough with no problems. And then they just refused to sign. And we never did find out what happened. I just lump it into cold feet. Who knows what happened? Maybe a divorce or job change or something crazy entered the picture and they didn't want to share it with us. Totally within their right. They lost their earnest money, but such is life. So once we've dealt with the shock with the seller and the emotional roller coaster that goes with that, and we temper it with the playbook and let them know, hey, we get right into action. Let's not waste our time. Let's get going, because if we let the seller sit and stew, then it's not going to do anybody, including them, especially them, any good. The next thing you need to do is get out of the deal. So you're officially under contract. So depending on how it comes unglued, sometimes it's a one-person decision. So there are cases where, say, for example, a buyer is supposed to turn in their earnest money or meet a specific deadline. Maybe it's a home sale contingency deadline or a financing trigger deadline, like a application or ordering the appraisal, and they miss it. Technically, depending on how the contract is written, the seller could just end it right there with one signature and no input from the buyer. They can just say the deal is off. Again, it goes back to RTFC. You need to read that contract to see, just because somebody sends you a release and says we're out, the contract might not allow for that, or it may. So you need to know that first. But assuming you need a mutual release, meaning both parties have to sign it, then you're going to look for, brace yourself, a document called a mutual release. We try to get very creative here. So the mutual release typically does two things. It not only releases everybody from the contract, but it usually resolves the earnest money situation. Now, if you had no earnest money, first of all, shame on you. And if you did have earnest money, then it needs to be dealt with. There are lots of ways that it can be automatically dealt with, but that is just not the topic for today. We've got an upcoming episode all about earnest money, so I'll get into it then. But for now, the mutual release is going to put you on a path where you can kill the deal and deal with the earnest money. One of the things we like to do with that document is I'm kind of a control freak. So I prefer to prepare that particular document myself. So if I know the deal's coming unglued, there is one other tactic. So let's talk about this for real quick. So if this is truly out of the blue, you feel like the buyer has been in love with this property, they've been speaking very glowingly of it, and this really seems like it's out of left field that they want out, I'm going to tell you to immediately do nothing. Don't do anything. Wait 24 hours. Nobody's going anywhere. One less day on the market isn't going to kill you. So wait 24 hours. You would be shocked at how many times a buyer goes from crazy in love with the house, wake up with the mother of all hangovers, and then get the inspection report, and all of a sudden things are crazy and they're really feeling it, and they just go, I'm out. Don't care, get me out of this deal. Well, sometimes, many times actually, that pendulum will swing back to center the next day, often the very next day. So it's not unusual for us to get the notice that, hey, they want out. I do nothing with it except acknowledge that they said it. And then we wait, and the next day I get another note that says, hold the phone. They want back in. So can we reopen? Yes, absolutely. But if now you've seen this coming and you were worried all along that they were going to drop you, probably don't wait until 24 hours. Let's get back out there. So I like to prepare the mutual release for a couple of reasons. I mentioned one is I'm a control freak, and the other is on the mutual release, I'm always going to give the earnest money to my seller. If the buyer wants out and they've wasted my time and they've wasted my seller's days on market, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and ask for it. Doesn't mean they're going to give it to me. But it's worth a shot. If that doesn't work, which sometimes it does, every once in a blue moon, they'll just sign it, send it back, and then we get the earnest money for the seller. It's a little consolation, but it's better than a sharp stick in the eye. The next move, if they reject that, is to offer to split it. Because the thing is, they want out of this deal, and they can't go buy another house unless they're, filthy rich until they get out of this deal, because you can't legally be under contract for two homes when you only intend to buy one. That's trouble. So they want out of the deal. And so I like to at least try to negotiate. They may stand on principle and point to contract stuff. And, the contract says blah, blah, blah. And I get all that. I do. But the bridge is burning anyway. Why not try to make some money out of it? Or, surprise, sometimes when you push hard enough on the earnest money, they come back. They just decide, you know what, never mind. So you just never know. But if you don't ask, the answer is always no. What I like to do is at least negotiate, and you never know. These negotiations can result in a positive outcome for the buyer and the seller. And if not, then maybe they can get my seller compensated in some way. Okay. As most of you know, we do not run paid ads for the Ohio Property Group or for this podcast. We rely entirely on word of mouth. So, to that end, if you found any of this content valuable, or you just feel like being a nice person today, please take a few seconds, give us a rating or a thumbs up if you're on YouTube. And if you have time, please leave us a short review. I would consider it a personal favor. Now, let's get you back to your podcast. So if you can't agree on the earnest money, which very often is difficult to do, a lot of my sellers after a day of this will just say, you know what, forget it. I just want to get back out there. Or sometimes the buyer will say the same thing. So once you're released from the first contract, you've got this little window of time where the property is still showing as under contract in the MLS, and the rest of the world thinks it's under contract. But you've got a little window and there's a handful of things I need you to do in that window before you put it back on the market. Because while we're busy working, we're going to work on a couple of fronts. One is we're going to work on the property, get it ready to refresh and put back out there as a rebounded property. But I'm also going to start what we call a whisper campaign to any potential buyers with this tiny window of time. People love a deal. People love an opportunity that not everybody gets. They like to be in the exclusive crowd. And so if there is a backup offer that you're in love with, then this is pretty simple. You just contact them, you let them know. And I'm talking about it's buttoned up, it's on paper, they've signed. You just need to notify them at that point that, hey, you're up. First deal fell apart. They're going to have some questions. So you're going to want to, sort that part out. I like the phrase, the buyer got cold feet. Leave it at that. If you have an inspection, if you have an appraisal, feel free to share it with your backup because it may save them a few steps or a few dollars or both. But if you have a backup, you need to get them in the primary seat. You need to look over the contract, adjust all the dates, because depending on how long you were under contract with the first buyer, the dates in the backup contract probably don't make sense anymore. So go back through that contract, maybe make some edits, maybe draw up a clean version and have everybody sign it. And Bob's your uncle, you're back to the races. In that case, you don't need the rest of this episode. So if you don't have a backup buyer, one of the things I like to do while we're getting ready to remarket the property, and we'll talk about that in a second, is I like to reach out to anybody I've got in my file. So you can go through the showing calendar, pull out anybody who showed it, anybody. I don't care how long it's been. Go through your old offers, anybody that made an offer, even if it didn't come together or if it was a BS lowball offer, you just never know. And at one point, these people were interested enough to spend time chasing this property, even if they didn't make an offer. At one time, they were interested. If nothing else, you're going to get some feedback, which may help you. Anybody that has emailed you, called you, texted you about that property, all of those should be going into the file during the marketing phase so that you have this list. And we don't throw that away ever. Actually, we just archive it after the deal is done. But until that deal is closed for reals, we don't get rid of any of that stuff because you just never know. So that whisper campaign looks like this. In my book, and if I think it's actually in the free marketing materials that or the free seller tools that we give away at talkingrealty.com, there is an email called the Little Birdie. And I bet you're savvy enough to figure out what this says. But in summary, it says, hey, agent, or hey, buyer, if you're dealing directly with the buyer, a little birdie says, or rumor has it, or I can't really get into specifics, but XYZ 123 Main Street, whatever you want to call it, may be coming back on the market. Naturally, I can't get into the details. This saves you from having to answer a ton of questions. If they ask, what's our answer? The buyer got cold feet. Okay. That's kind of my standard answer for all of them, no matter what the real reason. And the truth is, you're not really at liberty to get into that. So don't. This property may be coming back on the market, and I wanted to give you a heads up in case your buyer was thinking of making a move before we put it back on the market. That is the operative sentence, before we put it back on the market. That gives a sense of urgency to that agent or that buyer. And if it is an agent and they haven't found a house for that buyer yet, and they were lamenting about that one that got away, then this is perfect because now that all you need is one of those people to just light up. And it happens. They'll send us a really great offer or their old offer, which we can then negotiate. But they understand right now they're not competing with everybody. They're competing with, in their minds, nobody. You can certainly let them know that you're letting other buyers know, but that's up to you. And it doesn't really have too much of an impact at this point. So you let them know that they've got this tiny window. That's the real mover right there. And you're going to get one of a couple of responses. This is like when a property gets an offer and then you do a whisper campaign to the other agents that have shown it or made offers. You get one of two responses, typically. One, no, unfortunately they've moved on, or no, they wrote on another property, or no, they fell off the face of the earth and move to Mars, who knows? Or, oh my gosh, thank you for letting me know. And then we're off to the races. So very, very important. You can even, if you get enough interest, you could even set an offer deadline. Bold move, but if you've got enough interest there, you can certainly pull it off. All right. So if they start pressing you on what happened to the first buyer, share what you have. If you have stuff that benefits you. So if you have an inspection report, and I don't care how damaging it appears to be, they know something happened. I mean, you can hide behind the cloak of we can't talk about it, and that's fine. But if you get permission from your seller to use that inspection report, which I would highly recommend, because we're going to use it in the relaunch of the marketing anyway, so you might as well prepare them and say, listen, I need back from you, seller, a list of everything on that inspection report that you're going to address. And they will provide you with that list. Some of the stuff they're going to fix, hopefully all of it they're going to fix, but if they can't or won't, then at least you could disclose it. And just like we did with the post-inspection response an episode or two ago, we list out everything that's bad about the house, all the material, latent defects, all the safety, structural, environmental, electrical, plumbing, all of it. We list them all out in what we call a seller response or a seller statement. And then we just say the seller corrected, seller did not correct, seller didn't address. If it's small and simple, hopefully they address an overwhelming number of it. If it's something huge, then let's at least get some quotes. Quotes are free. You can get a contractor many times to come out and at least give you a quote, so you kind of know what you're dealing with. So the more data you can pile into this, so you've got this now, this whole packet, this inspection report. You've got the seller's response to the inspection report. You've got either receipts or some sort of verification that they did the repairs. And if they can't do them, you've got a new set of disclosures that talks about what they fixed, what they didn't fix, and then maybe some quotes if there's major stuff that was found that the seller can't afford to or is not inclined to deal with. So sometimes in an estate, the family doesn't want to put any more money into it. That's fine. So you're just going to have to disclose it because you can't not disclose what you know. It's illegal. So we'll leave it at that. So if your whisper campaign works out and you get another buyer or two, then excellent. You go back to the negotiating table, you put the deal together and you run it back. We go through the whole closing and inspection and appraisal process, get them through to closing. All right. But if that doesn't work out, then we're going to need to put the property back on the market. So quick recap. Step 1, get out of the first deal. Step 2, while you're getting ready to relaunch, you're going to do a whisper campaign with either your backup buyer or anybody who showed any interest in the property. All right. Step 3 is going to be relaunching. If the step 2 doesn't pan out, you need to relaunch. We need to get it back out there. And of course, the number one question is going to be what happened. So somewhere in the remarks, you're going to put that the buyer got cold feet. Even if the property failed to appraise, one, you're under no moral or legal obligation to disclose that. So get that out of your head. That's one appraiser's opinion. I promise you, if you have 3 appraisers come out blind, like no contract price, no nothing, no list price, you send them into that property blind, they're not going to come up with the same number. All 3 of them are going to come up with a different number. It might be off only a little bit, but I promise you, I will bet you something that I really love. Let's see here. I don't know. Something I really love. My Cam Hayward Pittsburgh Steelers signed jersey. I will bet you my Cam Hayward signed jersey that those 3 appraisers are not going to come up with the same number. It's just not statistically, it's highly unlikely. All right. So you don't have to disclose that it was a low appraisal. And here's why it's a cold feet issue. Because if the buyer really wanted that property, they would find a way to make up the gap between the appraisal and what their financing was for. But they didn't. So I assume they didn't want it bad enough, i.e. cold feet. So that is my standard answer. But regardless, keep it vague. If you really want to, you can also say, this is my alternative, because some sellers push back on the cold feet thing. So I wrote down an alternative line, which is the first buyer was unable to follow through with the purchase. So for those of you who don't like the cold feet, there is plan B. Okay. As you move forward, though, get that line out and then drop it. Do not get into a protracted discussion about what happened with the first buyer. Stick to the facts that, particularly those that weigh in your favor. Plus, you could be stepping on some legal issues, so you don't want to do that. So those two messages would go in the public remarks, if possible, or in the broker remarks, and definitely into the showing remarks or private showing remarks, if there is such a thing. It just depends on your system and how it's set up. But just remember, a few days after the property goes back on the market, go ahead and, if you're not under contract already, go ahead and remove all those comments because you don't need it. And one thing to keep in mind is that once the property goes back under contract, you're going to want to go in and take those messages out because, well, there's just a lot of reasons why. I won't bore you with them. So once again, before you go back on the market, we need to update the disclosures and we need to be transparent. So we've talked about what happened to the first buyer in vague terms, but I like a fresh set of disclosures. And you can argue with me about that and say, we don't need them and there's no legal reason to do them. And I'm talking about the seller property disclosures where they're talking about the physical condition of the property. I like a new set of dates because as a buyer, if I know you were under contract and then you were not under contract, there's a part of my brain that's going to wonder if it was a physical issue. And I'm looking at disclosure statements from well before it went under contract. So I don't know if you're being sneaky and not updating them, but I would love to see a brand new set with the new relaunch of the property. So if things have changed, certainly include them. But even if nothing has changed, open them back up. In DocuSign, they let you do this. You could just unlock them, and then you can re-sign them, and it'll give them a new signing date. As I mentioned earlier, if the previous buyer did an inspection, you will have a copy of it because it's part of the post-inspection process that they must provide you with a copy of it. So I'm going to assume that if there were inspections that you have that in some sort of electronic PDF format. So go through the report, have the seller address as many issues as possible, and create a repair list. At that point, as we talked about with the Whisper campaign, I would like to see that seller response. I'd like to see any documentation we can come up with. Because what I'd love to do with this, if it's feasible, I'd like to upload it into the MLS into what's called the supplemental documents. Almost all MLSs have a way to upload stuff, documents that the public can't see, but brokers and realtors can. And then the other thing you can do is just mention in the comments or mention to anybody you talk to that these are available upon request. So if you can't upload them or you don't want to upload them or for whatever reason, that's not feasible, just keep them handy, keep them in a folder on your in your email folder so that it's easy to grab and send anytime somebody asks about it. And then you just tell people, look, you want to see the inspection report? I've got it. And then you just include all that other stuff I mentioned before. It is extremely powerful. It builds trust. And in many ways, we see those second offers come around after a rebound that don't even have inspection requests in them. If we've been thorough enough with the inspection report, the seller statement, the new disclosures, any documentation, warranties, or quotes or whatever, many, many times, the next buyer doesn't even bother with inspections because everything is fresh. Everything is very, very thorough. So before we flip it back to active, and I'm making all of these changes while it's in pending status. And in most MLSs, it can stay in that pending status until the seller's ready to put it back out there. If your MLS has strict rules about this, like once the deal is done, some of them have rules that you have to reactivate it within a certain number of hours. If the seller's not ready to go and you can't leave it in pending status because that draws the least amount of attention, I like to leave it in pending status. But if you can't, then go ahead and mark it as temporarily off market. But that requires more paperwork and more explanation in most cases. So if we can avoid that, great. A lot of times we just leave it in pending because it's usually only a day or two before we got everything wrapped up and we can go back out there. But regardless, don't be messing with the status until you're ready to go active. So recreating the buzz, though, that is hard because a new listing, it just creates a wave of interest. A new listing creates a wave of interest that is nearly impossible to recreate on a rebound. But we're going to do our best. So there's a couple of things I want you to do. Number one, the photos are out of season, outside photos. So the classic property's been under contract for 60 days, which went from February to April. There was snow in the February pictures and no leaves on the trees, but in April, everything's green and beautiful. Well, go for it. Because buyers, I mean, they understand when they're looking at a property, they can tell immediately when a photo is old. So if the reverse is true, if it was um, the dead of summer and then all of a sudden you're rebounding when the leaves have all changed, you need to take those photos again. If the leaves have changed and now the leaves have fallen, and your old photos have all the pretty fall leaves, I know it's wonderful. You can leave one in there to show them what the property looks like year round. I think that's a great idea. We get a lot of those from folks who plan ahead and they just happen to have front photos or back photos of their house showing the different seasons. Wonderful. But other than that, your main front photo should be a very, very, very recent photo. So if there's snow on the ground and no leaves on the trees, your home should not look like summer lush. Beautiful green lawn, because everybody's going to look at it and think, wow, how long has this thing been on the market? Okay, so you follow me there. So I want updated photos. I would like to tweak the listing description. And I've got a whole playbook on this. If you go to my website and just go to my blog and search for property description, um, or go through the free seller tools, we have a whole thing on writing I call it the love story. And there's a way to write the love story and there's a way not to write the love story. So check it out. If we haven't done an episode on that already, or we probably redo one. If we haven't done one, we will do one. But anyhow, you want to tweak the love story, AKA the property description, and you want to highlight any repairs that have been made. So if the inspections from the previous buyer netted you some things that you ended up fixing, let's talk about it. Let's make a big deal out of it. Recent inspection available. New furnace, new water heater, updated electrical, updated plumbing, whatever it is you fixed, let's shout about it. Okay. This is one of those advantages I talked about with the second time around the track, that on the second lap, we get to talk about things that are better than they were on the first lap. So that kind of makes up for some of it. Hey, real quick, by far the scariest part of a home sale is the inspection and appraisal process. Sellers lay awake with nightmares over this. Our digital course, Living to Listing, teaches anybody how to turn any property into the perfect listing so you sail through inspections and appraisals so it sells faster and for more money, and you sleep like a baby. In Living to Listing, you get checklists, tools, and walkthrough videos for every step from yours truly. And here's my promise. If this course doesn't blow you away, let me know. Not only will I give you a full refund, I'll let you keep the course. You literally have nothing to lose. That's the best deal I can possibly make. Head over to Living to Listing, that's livingtolisting.com, and see for yourself. Check out the free preview videos and let me know what you think. Thanks. Okay, so now we've got everything ready. Okay, we've gotten out of the first deal. We've done our whisper campaign. We've gotten the property ready to relaunch. We've redone all of our paperwork, our photos, our property description. Now it's time to pull the lid off this thing. So here's what I would like you to do. Oh, last thing, make sure the sellers look at the price again. If for whatever reason they need to adjust the price, let's do that again before we relaunch. So if they're going to lower the price, fine. If they did a whole bunch of improvements and they need to raise the price, not only should you do it before you go active, hopefully a day or two before you go active, because that will attract less attention. But you got to explain this. You can't just go from, if you were at 250 and then you had to put a new roof or a furnace on or something and you want 260 now, that's fine. You have a better house, so you should charge more. But you need to explain that new roof installed, new HVAC installed this month, this year. So you write this particular month. If it's August, you're going to write 8/ and then the year, so that it's very, very fresh. And that goes in the public and private remarks. So I want people to understand why we raised the price. Otherwise, they're going to think you're just nuts or greedy or both. Okay, so we are ready. Everything is ready to go. Engine's revving, and we're waiting for the green light. What I want you to do is flip it on in the middle of the week, Thursday, Friday, something like that. I'm sorry, Wednesday, Thursday. I guess Friday's not the middle of the week. Anyway, Wednesday, Thursday, you're going to flip it back on. But I need you to block some showings, put in some showing restrictions, because hopefully the first time anybody can see it is Saturday morning at your open house. Because that's what I want you to do, is book an open house for Saturday at noon. As always, my standard caveat, unless you're competing with an Ohio State football game, do not do that. Hopefully it's a night game or they're off that week. But make sure that you book you're flipping back on mid to late week. You don't want any showings if possible. And then you're going to have your first availability of that property on Saturday at noon for your 2-hour, no more than you can do 1 hour, but you can't do more than 2-hour open house. I don't want this long, ridiculous open house because it's not very effective. Short, early open houses, that's what you want. So that is how you come back on the market. I didn't talk about social media because this is not a social media discussion, but certainly this would be a great time to start shouting out. You could almost treat it like a coming soon while it's still impending. You can start talking about this coming soon on social media, that, soon to be on the market, 123 Main Street with its new beautiful photo, and then maybe talk about the open house that's going to be Saturday at noon. You can also put recent inspection available, recent list of repairs available, whatever. Talk about it. Deal with the buyer's fears, the future buyer's fears in your marketing. So social media is a great way to layer on top of this and try to build up as much demand as possible, because the goal would be to have at least 2 or 3 interested buyers show up at your short little Sunday or Saturday open house. They see each other, and truth 11, nothing motivates a buyer like another buyer. All right. So I think what you're picking up here is that a failed deal is not the end of the world. It is a chance during rebound to come back like the old $6 million man, stronger, better, faster, without spending $6 million. You're also going to have a lot more knowledge about the process and about the buyer market. And you're just going to be that much more confident when you get back out there and get ready to list this house again. Now, I'm a big mindset guy, so I believe in staying positive. I believe in avoiding negative words, negative things as much as possible. And what's great about my life is I'm surrounded by people who get that. So I encourage them to call me out on it. So you may want to either stick some Post-it notes up and or tell your family and friends that, hey, if you hear me going negative, or you hear me, crying in my root beer about this deal falling apart, stop me, because this is real. Nobody wants to deal with a seller who's down in the dumps, and you're not going to make as much money versus you saying, oh my gosh, my buyer is out there. A better buyer, a stronger buyer is on their way to me. And this is their dream home. We're probably going to be friends forever. And they're going to love my house as much as I loved my house. That's the attitude you want to head back out there. So Victoria, let's talk about Victoria. Victoria was really upset because of all the things I mentioned in the beginning. We had an $840,000 cash buyer, which was above list. We were listed at $829,000. And there were very few contingencies, really just the one, the inspection, but that's the one that tripped us up. Then they moved out. So now we've got an unstaged property going back on the market. All she can think about is the negative. So I had to have a good chat with her. Her husband was really instrumental in this as well. Very confident guy. And he was just like, absolutely, we're going to find a better buyer and we're going to nail this thing. So we do everything we talked about. We updated the description. We updated the photos. We took that inspection report and we shouted about it because it really wasn't very bad. And everything that was on there, boop, all fixed. Because they just hired a guy, one of these jack of all trades guys, to come in, and he literally fixed everything. We added photos that were available. We had a whole work order with everything written out, paid bill. I mean, we really nailed this stuff. So any future buyer could get all of that big packet. So here we go. Drum roll, please. We whisper campaigned this thing. We didn't even have to go back on the market. We whispered this one out to the other buyers, and it wasn't another buyer. It wasn't one of those. Sometimes they're bitter because they lost the first time, but it was somebody who showed it. It didn't get in on the bidding war. They came back. We had plenty of other interest. So I was able to indicate that yes, we do have a lot of interest in this property. We would like to wrap it up before it goes back on the market. She wanted another showing. The agent wanted another showing. So they got back in that day, vacant. So nice and easy to get in and out of. And I sent her ahead of time all of the new disclosures, the inspection stuff we talked about. And she turned around brought me a cash buyer for $870,000, $30,000 more. And you'll love this. We still closed on time. We used the same title company as we were using, and we just picked up right where we left off. We actually closed almost to the day when we would have closed with the first buyer, but we had an extra, $30,000 to deal with. No inspections, of course, no appraisal. So things just moved really, really fast. And that buyer was completely overjoyed. Naturally, the sellers thought I was some sort of genius, which of course I am. We were very humble. I'm just kidding. We were high-fiving like crazy in the office over this one. We're virtual, so we had to do it over Zoom, but we did do it. So very, very excited for them, and all's well that ends well, as they say. So if you want to know more about my inspection rebound or appraisal rebound or just cold feet buyer rebound, it's all in my book. You Can Sell It. It's on Amazon. If you just search for You Can Sell It book, or you can go to my website and you can get it. If you head over to talkingrealty.com, at the top menu, you're going to see a bunch of drop downs for resources, and one of them is the book. So everything I just told you pretty much is in there, or you have a full-on transcript of it right here. But hopefully this gets you where you're going. And if you're down in the dumps because it happened, just know that there's hope. There's a great buyer out there. So along with the book, you can pick up those 50 pages of free seller tools that we have on our website. Anybody that wants them can get them. Also, I want to hear from you. If you employ any of these tactics, please take a minute. Let me know how it worked out. If you think of something new or exciting, oh man, am I all ears for you. I would love to hear from you, because all of our ideas, all of our tactics and ideas and techniques and playbooks and plays come from sellers. Sellers make a suggestion, or we try something crazy and the seller is on board and it works. And then we just get to use this place as our own laboratory for getting better and better and better. So you are a part of that. I cannot wait to hear what you come up with. So please don't keep it to yourself. All right, let me let you get back to your day. Thanks for hanging out with me. See ya. Thanks for sticking around. Hopefully you learned something, maybe had a little fun. If so, please share this episode, either privately or on the old socials. Feel free to tag me if you do. The Talking Realty podcast is brought to you by the Ohio Property Group, a family-owned brokerage serving all 88 Ohio counties with realtor services. By the way, if you have questions, topics, or guests you'd like to see us cover in the future, I would love to hear from you. Just head over to talkingrealty.com or check the show notes for my contact information and say hello. You got my email, my phone number, even my call schedule if you want to hop on there and let's talk. Thanks again for tuning in. Until next time, please keep making smart moves in your real estate journey. For the Ohio Property Group, this is Glen Whitten signing off. And remember, you can sell it. We can help.